when something like this happens, I mean, charities like yourself, you're there on the ground. Is there enough help for people? We're seeing, obviously, people helping as much as they can, but is there enough resource on the ground to get these people out? They've been trapped there for nearly a week, some people now.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important question. I would say there's never enough, quick enough, really, and the whole system, the whole logistical system in southern Turkey has been overwhelmed. Airports you'd normally fly into have been destroyed, hospitals collapsed, clinics gone, the number of buildings that are damaged makes it very hard to operate out of, roads have been blocked. And this entire system was where trucks that used to move into Northwest Syria, that was already in crisis and already had millions of people dependent on humanitarian aid before this earthquake hit, has been clogged up entirely. So I think that Martin Griffith, who you had on your previous package, the UN's aid chief, he has said that the UN has so far failed people in northern Syria in particular due to the logistical slowness of this response.
James, I've got 11 national newspapers in front of me on my desk here, and not one of them has the earthquake featuring as a story on their front pages. And this is the awful thing. People like you and everybody else involved in the rescue mission now have to go about their business, and the world moves on.
It does, and the world is not short of humanitarian crises at the moment. Famine in the Horn of Africa, the situation in Afghanistan is pretty awful. We're almost a year into the escalation of the war in Ukraine. It does move on. I think that the British people have been incredibly generous once again through the DEC appeal, and that will give millions of pounds that will help towards the response that will last into the months and years to come. And if you remember, these are children out of school, children who have lost some of their family members, or in some cases their entire family. So yes, there is a challenge between a story moving on and what that means for people in southern Turkey and in northern Syria. But I think in this response, such has been the profile in the last week, that it will capture, I think, people's imaginations for months to come, I hope.
Sarah and I were just talking here about, we do hear a lot about what's happened in Turkey, awful no matter where it's happened, but we sort of think, what's going on in Syria? It seems
neglected a little bit,
yeah,
in terms of the news coverage.
There's less news coverage about what's going on. Or do we have a clear picture of what's happening in Syria?
I think it's far less clear. It's a sort of heart of darkness sometimes when you think about the restrictions that have been put on aid agencies being able to get to children in northwest Syria. Let's not forget that these are children who've experienced 12 years of conflict.
Yeah.
And with the numbers under the rubble are far less known than what's happening in Turkey. The death toll hence will expand and increase substantially once people are finally able to get into northwest Syria. Remember also that children in northwest Syria may have left homes sometimes as many as 20 times in their short lifetimes because of violence that continues. So I would say that the situation for children in northwest Syria is that they are the most vulnerable, and they're the ones who need our help the most.
Talking about children, James, my mother actually was caught up in the 2005 earthquake in Kashmir. And one of the things that really breaks my heart, and I'd really like you to shed some light on this, is that we are seeing children being pulled out. Some of their family members have died. What happens to those children? Because I do know that they are very vulnerable, especially to child trafficking and abuse. How are you looking after those children?
It's such an important question. Children have a different muscular structure, so their ability to survive crush injury, first and foremost, is different from adults. But yes, those who are taken out, we're hearing reports of hundreds of children arriving separated or unaccompanied from their families at various safe zones in Turkey, certainly. And yes, these children are especially vulnerable. It's very disorientating, traumatized, perhaps injured. For every one death in an earthquake, you have 3 to 4 severe injuries. So making sure that there is a child protection component of this response. So the media coverage understandably focuses on people looking through the rubble and large-scale sort of vehicles digging up and trying to save lives, but also child protection, making sure that the children who are arriving in tented accommodation, that we know who they are, we know who we can try their best to find their relatives, or that we can make sure there's systems, whether run by the government or by other agencies, to care for them. I think there's been a huge outpouring of support offering to some of these orphans who have been created who've become orphaned because of this earthquake. So I think that's a hugely insidious sort of challenge from this earthquake, moving beyond the emergency phase, is to how to protect such large numbers of children. I mean, if you think about the numbers of children affected, it's the equivalent to about a third of the UK's entire child population that suddenly you're having to look after. So it's a huge scale, it's hugely difficult, and we've got to do our best to make sure we can stand up to it.